Hey guys, Hamsterwheel here with a new video and welcome to episode 5 of Gearing for Dungeoneering. A video series where we check out what gear you can get for your freshly dinked level 70 so you can do respectable DPS in dungeons and eventually make its way up to raids. Today we're going to tackle not just one class, but multiple as they all kinda need the same gear. So I'm calling this episode the Clothie Caster episode. One thing I will add though is a couple of more recommendations than what I usually do, as I realize that there's Clothie casters that rely on crit, for instance Destruction Warlocks or Fire Mages, and Clothie casters that don't rely on crit that much, for instance Affliction Warlocks or Shadow Priests. And without further ado, let's get started. So for this video I decided to get one of the possible options and go with a good old Fire Mage. And this Fire Mage has definitely a lot of room for improvement, with crappy gear that offers it lackluster spell damage, spell hit and spell crit. And when we put it to the test, it pulls out a measly 491.2 DPS. So let's once again work our magic, and there we go. That's much better. So what items would I recommend for Clothie casters? Well, let's check it out. Alright, I'm going to start off with the headpiece as always. And for the headpiece, I'm going to start off with the Magari Ritualist Horns. This is the same headpiece that I recommended with my Balance Druid. And well, look at it. It has 16 intellect, 18 stamina, 15 crit rating, 12 hit rating, and a massive 50 spell damage. So all in all, an absolutely amazing headpiece. And probably better what you can find in Heroics. So definitely worth getting. There's only two problems with this, and one that it is a fairly long quest chain, and two that it's horde only. So I will give you guys two alternatives for this one. And the first one is the Evoker's Helmet of Second Sight. Again, a bit of a staple of this series, and doesn't really surprise anyone probably because the stats are really good. Has 12 stamina, 15 intellect, 8 spirit, 3 sockets, a socket bonus of 5 spell damage and healing, 24 spell crit, 35 damage and healing. So all in all, an amazing headpiece. The only thing is that with this headpiece you will need a flying mount to complete the last part of this quest chain. So even though I've already given this as an alternative, I will give you guys one more as a bit of a cheaper alternative, and also a non-crit alternative for, let's say, if you're just an Affliction Warlock or a Shadow Priest that's just looking for some spell damage and you don't really care about that crit rating or anything else like that. And that alternative is the Atamal Crown with 16 intellect, 14 spirit, 21 stamina, and 46 damage and healing. So as you can see, a much simpler, much more basic item compared to the other two items, but still very impressive for the fact that it's a green helm. So still worth getting, especially again if you're a Shadow Priest or an Affliction Warlock and you really don't care about crit, then this is actually a pretty nice alternative for you to get. And it doesn't require a flying mount or anything like that, so it's probably a really good and cheap and cheerful alternative for the first two items that are recommended for the headpiece. Okay, next up is the necklace, and for the necklace I'm going to go with the Torque of the Sethek Prophet. Another staple of this gearing series for good reason, because it's really good. It offers you 18 intellect, 21 spell crit rating and 19 damage and healing. So, for this Fire Mage, the 21 spell crit is really nice. The 19 damage and healing, also a welcome sight. And the 18 intellect kind of increases our mana pool. And like I said before, it's not super hard to get. All it requires you to do is go to Sethek Halls and free a mob that is right after the first boss. So fairly easy to get and a really good necklace. It's kind of on par with what you get out of level 70 normal dungeons or heroics in terms of blue items. So definitely worth getting. However, I have an alternative for you guys, and that is the Pendant of the Battle Mage. The reason I decided to throw this in is because the Torque of the Sethek Prophet has a lot of crit rating. And if you're an Affliction Lock or a Shadow Priest or whatever, you don't really care about the crit rating, you can go for this one, which is the Pendant of the Battle Mage, 12 stamina, 11 crit rating, and 25 damage and healing. So basically more damage and healing and less crit rating. So either of those are really good options. And this one, to be fair, is a little bit easier to get. It involves a quest chain, but you can solo pretty much every single part of that quest chain. So very easy to get and a pretty darn good necklace. Okay, next up is the shoulders. We're going to go with a very familiar item, and that is the Spalders of the Tornheart. 7 intellect, 8 spirit, 10 stamina, 18 spell crit rating, and 40 damage and healing. You've probably seen this before in the Balance Druid video, the Elemental Shaman video. I mean, there's really no other way around it. These are just the best caster shoulders that you can get through questing in the Burning Crusade before you start farming a certain item out of dungeons, or before you start doing heroics or raids or whatever. They're just insanely good. So that's what I would recommend you to get. However, these are part of the Cipher of Damnation quest chain, so they won't be out right at the get-go when Burning Crusade launches or on your server, whatever server you're playing on. So I am going to throw in an alternative, and that alternative is the Destroyer's Mantle. 12 stamina, 12 intellect, 8 spirit, 9 crit rating, and 35 damage and healing. So a little bit worse than the Spalders of the Tornheart. They don't provide you with as much crit and a little bit less damage and healing, but still pretty nice for level 70, even though you can get them quite early on, which is also kind of cool. It's part of a quest chain that's fairly short, and most people do this, so it's fairly easy to find people to complete it. So it's definitely a really good alternative for when the Cipher of Damnation quest chain isn't out yet. It's also what I would recommend if you're a non-crit Clothie, so to say, because even though these do have a bit of crit rating, that 35 flat spell damage is just really good. Alright, for the Cloak, I'm going to go with the Ogre Slayer's cover. 18 intellect, 11 spirit, 16 crit rating, and 20 damage and healing. You've seen this cloak before in the Elemental Shaman guide, and I like this cloak too because, well, right now I'm on a Fire Mage, and Fire Mages benefit a lot from crit, which is why I went for this item. And look at it, it's pretty darn good. It's not super complicated to get. It requires a quest chain in Nagrand, which will require you to get a few people, but again, the quest gives you a pretty nice selection of items, so it wouldn't be too hard to find people for this. However, I see that this cloak does have a fair amount of crit rating, so I'm going to throw in an alternative for you non-crit Clothie casters out there. And that alternative is the Cloak of Woven Energy, which you might have seen in my Balanced Druid guide. It offers you 13 intellect, 6 stamina, 3 spirit, 6 crit rating, and 29 damage and healing. So you're trading in a bit of crit chance for more damage and healing, which again, if you're a non-crit Clothie caster, that's what you want to do. So this is an amazing cloak for you guys to get if you're, again, let's say an Affliction Warlock or a Shadow Priest or something of those sorts. Moving on to the chest, which is the Auchenized Anchoret's Robe. Probably pronouncing that wrong, but there you go. This is this item. 24 intellect, 3 sockets, a socket bonus of 4 spell crit, 23 spell hit, and 28 damage and healing. Overall, a very nice robe. It takes place in the Auchenized Crypts, which is a fairly easy dungeon, and it takes just one quest to complete this and get this pretty damn nice robe. And I really like this because it has 3 gems, so there's a lot of flexibility. So if you're, like a Fire Mage, you can slap some spell crit and spell damage gems in there, which is what I did. Or again, if you don't rely on crit, you can go just for pure spell damage or spell hit or whatever it is you desire. It is a great chest piece, and I definitely recommend you to get that for your new level 70 character. Then we move on to the bracers, which are these Shatra wraps. 15 stamina, 15 intellect, 1 socket, a socket bonus of 3 stamina, and 21 damage and healing. So I really like that socket. Again, it gives you a little bit of flexibility in terms of what you want. In this case, I slapped some spell crit and spell damage gem in there, so I can get a little bit more stamina, which is, not super necessary, but I figured I might as well get it. And again, if you want to, you can put some pure spell damage in there, or pure crit, or whatever you want. To get these bracers, you'll have to do a Shadow Labs run, but it involves just a quest. So one full Shadow Lab run will guarantee you these bracers and another item, which we will get to in just a bit. Moving on to the weapon, we're going to go with Ornock's Ancient Scepter, which is also a bit of a staple of this series. It has 45 intellect, 27 stamina, 25 crit rating, and 103 spell damage. So all in all, a pretty nice staff. Unfortunately, it is part of the Cipher of Damnation quest chain, so there is a chance you can't get this on your server because it isn't out yet, that quest chain, because it's part of Tempest Keep. So I am going to give you guys 2 more alternatives. 2 more alternatives you probably know if you've been watching this series. And the first one is the Battle Mage's Baton, 45 stamina, 31 intellect, 30 spell crit, and 85 damage and healing. So not as good as the Scepter. It does offer you a little bit more crit chance and more stamina, so more longevity. And it does offer you less spell damage. But on the flip side, it is much easier to get. It is part of the Ring of Blood quest chain, which is something that pretty much everyone does in Burning Crusade. So fairly easy to get people for. And all in all, just a pretty decent staff, even for level 70. And the last item I want to recommend is the Bringer of Death. 32 stamina, 31 intellect, 42 spell crit rating, and 121 spell damage. So out of the 3, this has the most crit and the most spell damage. Unfortunately, it is a BOE, so it all depends on how expensive it is on your server. If it's there for cheap, definitely get this. It will offer you a lot of bang for buck. It is on par with stuff that drops out of heroics, apart from maybe 1 or 2 items, so definitely worth getting. If it's too expensive though, you can go for the Scepter if the Tempest Key quest chain is out, or the Battle Mage's Baton. Either of those 3 weapons will still provide you with some solid DPS. Next up is the Wand, and I'm going to go with the Nessingwary Safari Stick, which offers you 12 spell crit rating and 14 damage and healing. So very hard in the offensive stats, and pretty nice for our little Fire Mage right here, as it provides crit and some extra damage and healing. However, if you're a non-crit Clothie, I do have an alternative for you, and that is the Illidari Rod of Discipline. A wand with 9 stamina, 1 socket, a socket bonus of 2 spell damage and healing, and 13 damage and healing. And as you can see, I just slapped a purple gem in there with 4 spell damage and stamina, and I got the bonus, and that combined offers me 19 damage and healing, which is more than the Nessingwary Safari Stick, but it doesn't offer any crit. So, if you rely on crit, get the Safari Stick. If you don't, this is a very good alternative for you. Alright, trinket time. And for the first trinket, I'm going to go with the Vengeance of the Illidari. Again, a very well-known trinket to this series, and for good reason, because it's pretty damn good. It offers you 26 spell crit rating, and when you use it, you get 120 spell damage and 220 healing done for 15 seconds with a 1.5 minute cooldown. And as I said before, it's fairly easy to get. It's part of a pretty lengthy quest chain, but it is a quest chain that most people do when they enter Outlands, so it should be fairly easy to find people to kill the last mob, which you will have to do with a few friends. And then you get this pretty damn sweet trinket, so definitely worth getting and a great addition to your gear. Next up is the Ancient Draenei Arcane Relic, which this combo I also recommended for my Elemental Shaman, and it's also pretty damn good for my Fire Mage. So what does it do? Well, it provides you with 21 spell crit rating, and it does the same as the Vengeance of the Illidari in terms of use. It offers you 120 spell damage and 220 healing done for 15 seconds with a 1.5 minute cooldown. So pretty much identical to the Vengeance of the Illidari, except this offers you a little bit less passive spell crit, but still a great item, not super complicated to get, and for a green item it's still pretty damn nice. So I'd say it's also a great addition for your Clothie. Now, these are all focused on spell crit, so I am going to throw in 2 alternatives for you to get if you're not looking to get trinkets with any spell crit on them. And the first trinket I want to talk about is the Ancient Crystal Talisman. A trinket with 26 damage and healing, and when you use it you get 104 damage and healing for 20 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. So this provides you with a fair amount of passive spell damage, which is nice. And while the trinket does not give you as much bonus damage when you use it, compared to the Vengeance of the Illidari, it lasts longer, 20 seconds instead of 15, but it has a longer cooldown. But still, if you don't care about crit, this is a great first alternative. And the other one is the Starkiller's Bauble, which provides you with 26 passive spell hit rating, and when you use it, it increases your spell damage by up to 125 for 15 seconds. So it does a little bit more spell damage when you use it, and it provides you with passive spell hit. So you could even swap this out for one of the crit trinkets I recommended if you're looking for some spell hit. All in all, those 4 trinkets are really nice for whatever Clothie caster you have. You can swap them around and just basically decide what you want for your character. Alright, rings. And the first ring I'm going to recommend is the Signet of the Violet Tower. 5 intellect, 7 stamina, 29 damage and healing, and 2 mana every 5 seconds. So this doesn't have any crit and has MP5, so it's not ideal for our Fire Mage, but still it has a lot of damage and healing and a little bit of base stats, so still pretty damn nice, and it's also fairly easy to obtain. And for a green ring, I think it still has pretty nice stats. So that's what I would definitely recommend you to get as your first ring. Next up is the Evoker's Mark of the Redemption, which you've probably seen before. It is a ring with 15 intellect, 10 spell crit rating, and 29 damage and healing. Now, I do recommend this for both the non-crit Clothie caster as well as the Clothie caster that does rely on crit, simply because it offers you a lot of damage and healing and a fair bit of intellect. So, all in all, it is an amazing ring to get. It is a fairly lengthy quest chain and it will require you to have a few friends, but for something that you can get outside of dungeons through questing, it is definitely worth picking up. I mean, this stuff is on par with stuff that you can get out of heroics or level 70 normal dungeons, so definitely worth your time and definitely worth trying to get. Now I am going to throw in one more alternative, and that is the Band of Dominion, which offers you 21 spell crit rating and 28 damage and healing. So compared to the Signet of the Violet Tower, this is a lot better for my Fire Mage, for instance, because of a lot more crit rating. Unfortunately, this band is BOE, so it really depends on how expensive it is on your server. If you can find it for cheap, definitely pick this up. It offers you a lot of bang for buck. If it's too expensive, then just go for the Signet of the Violet Tower. That is also pretty darn decent for what it is. Moving on to the boots, the Shatra jumpers. Now this is the other item you can get out of one Shadow Labs run. So you can get both the bracers and the boots out of just one Shadow Labs run. And these are also pretty nice. They have 25 stamina, 17 intellect, 2 sockets, a socket bonus of +3 intellect, and 29 damage and healing. And as you can see, those 2 sockets really allow you to have some flexibility with this item. Right now I just went with a little bit of everything. But, you know, if you're a Shadow Priest or whatever, you can decide to go full spell damage. Or if you just want full crit, you can slap some crit gems in there. You can do whatever you want with it. So I really recommend this item. It's fairly easy to get. I mean, again, one full Shadow Labs run guarantees you these and the bracers. So definitely worth your time and checking out. Moving on to the legs. And for the legs, I'm going to recommend the Soothsayer's Kilt. 31 stamina, 16 intellect, 25 crit rating, and 30 damage and healing. So unfortunately, when it comes to cloth pants, there's not a whole lot of choice out there for really good items. Though this one for green is still pretty damn nice. It is not very complicated to get. You can pretty much solo this short quest chain. So I'd say it's definitely worth picking up. But to be fair, it does have a lot of crit rating. So I am going to give you guys an alternative if you don't care about crit. And those are the leggings of Concentrated Darkness. Pants with 15 stamina, 24 intellect, 14 spell crit rating, and 37 damage and healing. So as you can see, it has less spell crit rating, but more damage and healing. So if you're, more about damage and healing and you don't care about crit, these are probably a better alternative for you. However, it has to be said that this is also a BOE item, so you're going to have to check the auction house and see if you can bag these for pretty cheap. If you can and you don't care about crit, definitely pick these up. If you can't, then I'd say still go for the Soothsayer's Kilt. It might be suboptimal, but again, you're saving some money. Or if you're a class that relies on crit, so let's say my Fire Mage for instance, just go for the Soothsayer's Kilt. Either way, both these items are pretty damn decent for what they are, and I recommend both of them. Okay, moving on to the belt, and I'm going to recommend Gromtor's Bloodied Bandage. A belt with 12 intellect, 11 spirit, 15 stamina, and 35 damage and healing, which, honestly God, I think is pretty damn nice for a green belt. 35 damage and healing is a lot. Unfortunately, it doesn't offer any hit or crit, but at this gear level we can't complain too much, and this will definitely be a nice item for our freshly dinked level 70. Unfortunately, this is also part of the Cipher of Damnation quest chain, so you might not be able to get this, and if you can't, I'm going to throw you guys an alternative, which is the Kirin Var Journeyman's Belt. 16 intellect, 12 spirit, and 33 damage and healing. So this belt doesn't offer you any stamina, and offers a little bit less spell damage, so it is suboptimal, but still, fair amount of spell damage from a green belt. Definitely not too shabby for your new level 70 character. So I'd say this is definitely worth picking up. It might not be as good as the Gromtor's Bloodied Bandage, but still, it offers a fair amount of spell damage for a green belt. And the quest to get this is pretty damn simple. It's part of a quest chain, but you can solo pretty much every part of it. And considering how much spell damage it gives you, I'd say it's worth your time. And then last but not least, we have the gloves, which are the Tempest Touch. Gloves with 10 stamina, 20 intellect, 6 spirit. 2 sockets, a socket bonus of 3 spell crit, 27 damage and healing, and 10 spell penetration. So these gloves with those sockets offer you a lot of flexibility. This time around I went for a little spell damage and stamina, but again, if I wanted to, I could slap some pure crit in there. Or, again, if you're an Affliction Lock or a Shadow Priest, just slap some pure spell damage in there, and you'll get a lot of spell damage out of these gloves. So either way, they're nice gloves, offer you some flexibility, fairly easy to get. They require you to do the beginning stage of the Caverns of Time quest, which makes you go through Old Hillsbrad Foothills, free throw and kill the last boss, and then you basically have these, so definitely worth your time. And that's what I would recommend for either your non-crit Clothie or your crit Clothie. So there you go, that's the gear. And after all these upgrades, we've gotten a big bump in the amount of spell damage we have, a small increase in hit rating, almost 8% extra crit rating, and all that at the cost of a little bit less mana regeneration. So those stats are nice and all, but what does that mean in terms of DPS? Well, before we did a very mediocre 491.2 DPS, but now we're doing a much more impressive 722.8 DPS. That's an increase of 47.15%, which, if you ask me, is definitely a big accomplishment. So that's one fire mage that now does respectable DPS and is able to pull its own weight when going through dungeons to eventually make its way up to raids. And that's all for today. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm Hamsterwheel and have a good one.